Good morning, Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Feinstein, and members of the committee. My name is Tyler Reedy, and I am here today to advocate on behalf of changing the federal rules to allow for a more just economy based on free market principles and personal, private liberties to be exercised by U.S. citizens by repealing current laws and allow for the legalization of the sex industry and sex workers in this country. I come before you today to help end the stigma of those already working in the sex industry. By careful consideration of this committee, the entire Congress, and all levels of the federal government, I implore you to repeal Title 18, Chapter 17, Section 2422 of the U.S. Code that restricts the practice, sale, and use of prostitution. I'll start by giving you a short history of the world's oldest profession. As far back as ancient Greece, we see evidence of both brothels and prostitution that gave some women power and influence enough to become prominent members of their community. In ancient Rome, prostitution was widespread, public, and legal. There were rules surrounding the business practices, and the services were taxed. In the Middle Ages, many cities throughout Europe operated brothels that helped increase the economic activity of their community. Prostitutes in these brothels had rights and responsibilities, such as the right not to be abused by their employer, and could even be subpoenaed as witnesses to crimes. In short, as far back as history can record, prostitution has been a vital part of many economies. It wasn't until the 12th century that the Catholic Church took a position on prostitutes that said that prostitutes should be seen as lesser human beings and must repent and stop their quote-unquote sinful ways. This paved the way for anti-sex worker sentiment and gave permission to demean those working in the industry for centuries to come. In the United States, prostitution was tolerated until the 19th century, especially in San Francisco. It wasn't until one particular madam's poor decisions led to the prohibition of prostitution that also saw spillover effects into gambling, other quote-unquote sinful activities, and even prohibition on alcohol. This begs the question, should we punish a whole industry based on the actions of one person? If that were true, we would have already outlawed firearms at this point. But I digress. Today, the only place to legally participate in prostitution in the United States is only in certain parts of Nevada. And even then, those laws are extremely restrictive. Across the globe, nations such as the United Kingdom, Germany, Turkey, Australia, and New Zealand are living in the present on this particular issue, and have seen proven effects of the power of legalization or anti-prohibition legislation on the sex industry. My proposal is simple. Repeal the current statute and allow for legalization of prostitution in which states and localities can set specific guidelines for how to properly govern these practices. Similar to voting, sale of firearms, or sale of alcohol, my cause believes that each state and locality should take a strong lead on how that community can best distribute the services that the American consumer would like to purchase. The way I, and many Americans see it, this is an untapped section of the economy that is just ripe to be bottled and sold. Currently, illegal prostitution in this country is a $14 billion a year industry. $14 billion of untaxed income, untaxed sales, and untaxed Social Security and Medicaid dollars. Imagine for a moment what kind of services $14 billion of tax services could produce. Perhaps new bridges or roads, expanded healthcare for children, or even better, compensation for our distinguished active duty members and veterans. The National Football League is another industry that in 2017 resulted in $14 billion worth of tax sales. An enterprise just as big as the NFL is being kept in the shadows, and we need to be doing everything in our power to bring this industry into the light so that we can create additional revenue streams for the basic services that so many Americans depend upon. Look at this issue through a different lens. Imagine the employment opportunities for unskilled workers. If you can't already guess, jobs in this industry don't require a college degree. We try to tell our young adults in this country that in order to be successful, they need to go to college and obtain a 4-year degree. We know that college isn't for everyone. It can be limiting for some and difficult for others. Why wouldn't we provide another outlet for those wishing to seek unskilled employment that actually provides a decent paycheck with the prospects of providing for children of their own and even establishing a healthy retirement fund. We don't demean other unskilled labor, such as garbage employees, custodians, or plumbers. We view them as necessary and vital to maintaining our society. I believe that allowing legal prostitution will create a whole new workforce that helps lift people out of poverty and reduce the burden of the federal government to provide those basic services that I mentioned a moment ago. And finally, look at the issue as a matter of personal liberty, to which people in a free market economy should be allowed to make decisions that are best for them. If you look at the sex industry as a commodity, then look at the other commodities we don't regulate: iPhones, vehicles, airplane tickets, or even bullets for firearms. All of these items have the potential to cause harm or even be lethal. But in this country, we have a proud tradition of treating consumers as rational actors who shouldn't have restrictions on how to spend their paychecks. If you look at the sex industry as a service, then look at the other services we don't put limits on: dry cleaners, restaurants, personal assistants. We don't limit the number of times an American citizen is allowed to take their clothes to the dry cleaners, so why should we limit the number of times that they are allowed to purchase sex? Some might argue that prostitution is immoral and even quote-unquote sinful, but I think that's a point of view that is highly subjective, and the government of the United States has no business to dictate the morals of its citizens. Provided that consenting adults engage where goods and services are being traded, then who has the authority to tell them where one can or cannot spend their hard-earned dollars? In conclusion, I think that my argument is pretty straightforward. The government of the United States has no right to decide who, what, when, where, why, or how the dollars of the American consumer are spent. If this truly is a capitalist nation that operates on a free market system and rejects the notion of communism and socialism, then the committee has no choice but to consider repealing the current draconian laws and set forth a plan that outlines the legalization and acceptance of sex workers and the sex industry. At this time, I will take any and all questions. Thank you.